Okay, welcome back. This is Professor Plow, or Mr. Plow, teaching you WeVideo editing techniques. And this is our second video on B-roll. So this is part 3, but we've split the B-roll instruction up into 2 videos because they were getting a little bit long. So we'll get into further ways of working with B-roll in your WeVideo timeline. One thing that I will be doing is I'll be bringing in still images and using still images, which you are totally able to do. It's very conventional, and so I have several still images here that I'm just going to bring in one after another, and you see that when I do bring them in, WeVideo has a default length of about 4 or 5 seconds for each of those still images. So I'm going to bring in probably about 4 or 5.
We have to identify our partners in the community who are kind of like little satellites out in the county, who are on the ground every day with community members in need, and work together with them because they are the ones who are distributing this food to people.
Now notice that those still images work great. They're just as effective in telling a story, but there's obviously some adjustment that I need to make here because we can't show this still image that's been shot vertically over top of our interview because this doesn't fill the frame. And so we can see a little bit of Andrea in the background, which is not really very pleasing to the eye. So we have some things that we can do that will help us with this. Now, what we can do is we can put our playhead on that image, and then I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. And then what we can do is double click that image, and it brings us to a whole availability of menu options here that allow us to transform or adjust this image. And one of the things that we can do is we can adjust the scale of this to be able to fit in the frame. And then if it seems like off center here, like I can't see any of these people's faces, then we can adjust the position of that. So this would be, let's go ahead and change that. So if I change the y-axis, I can actually bring that image down. And I can also do it by just click, hold, and drag. So once I zoom it in, I can kind of expand that to feature people and their faces. I can also flip that image if I want and have that appear like that. I can also change its opacity, but I don't really need to. There's lots of options that I can do. I can crop it. I can even animate it. So we'll do that on another image here. But right now I'm going to save those changes. Now another feature that I want to point out, even if you have an image that fills the whole frame, there's something really cool that you can do with still images that allow for a little bit more dynamic movement. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this one, and I'm going to go into animation. So if I click on this, it says start position and scale. Now if I go and say, okay, this is where I want this image to start, but my end position, I want it to be a little bit closer. Watch what happens when I save this change and then play it back.
We have to identify our partners in the community who...
Well, that's really cool. So I can actually create a little bit of movement in my still images. Let's try that again with this one. And in fact, we'll go a little bit more complicated as well. So our start position, we're actually going to push in a little bit more. And we're also going to move it over as much as we can. And then our end position, we're going to push in the same amount. Let me make sure what my number is so it's consistent. 1.65. And then my end position, I'm going to have it about here. So we save those changes. So instead of pushing in, this one actually
kind of like little satellites out in the county who are on the ground every day with community members.
So this one might look good if we animate it in position and move in just a little bit. Or maybe we can move out a little bit. We'll move in just a little bit, save those changes.
Members in need, and work together with them, because
I don't really like this image. It doesn't really have any people in it. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that and then move this one over to fill the gap. Click on this and then give it a little animation as well. End position, scale up just a little bit. Maybe what I'll do is I'll scale this one up a little bit, and then I'll also move it over a little bit. Let's see what that looks like.
work together with them, because they are the ones who are distributing this food to people.
Cool, I like that. So now I've successfully utilized still images, 1, 2, 3, 4 of them, but I've also given them a little bit of movement as well, and that's something that you can now do in your work. And you can even double click on moving images, and if you need to crop them, if you need to drop their audio. So for example, I don't want to hear the audio from this, I want to continue to hear Andrea's voice. I can drop that audio, I can save that, and that's great.
We have to make connections with community members so that they understand what we're doing and how we're actually.
And then as well, any of these images, I can add animation. If there's chroma key involved, I can key it out. I can change its brightness, contrast, anything with color. I can also change its speed. I could slow it down or speed it up as well. I can crop it. And again, I can change its scale or its position. I can flip it, rotate it, change its opacity as well. So if I wanted an image that was slightly see-through, I could change its opacity. Sometimes that's fun to experiment with when you're dealing with multiple images together. And so there's a lot that we can do here that's pretty exciting, and maybe in a more advanced lesson we can really explore how to create even mosaics of still images, several still images on the screen at the same time. And you can experiment yourself as well now that you have access to the tools and you know how to use the tools in a basic format. So I'm going to continue to build out the B-roll here for the rest of this interview. Okay, so now you see that I have gone through and laid in some B-roll on the V2 track for everywhere that I have audio, and sometimes I leave gaps, and then sometimes here I'm not sure where I want to leave gaps yet, so I just kind of loaded in extra B-roll, knowing that I'll probably shorten some up and leave some gaps so that we can revisit and see Andrea from time to time as she's speaking. So now that I've got that layer done, to prepare for the next layer, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to create kind of some even spaces between these things here. So what I'm going to do, so this is about 55 seconds or so, 55, yep, to about 112. So there's about a 15-second gap right here. And then I'm going to create another 15-second gap or so between this one. And then of course I've got a gap here at the beginning, and then of course I have a gap here at the end. And the reason why I'm doing that is I'm preparing for what will be the third phase of editing, which will be the next video, and that will be what we call natural breaks. So be sure to tune into that one for the next phase of WeVideo editing, and we'll continue from there.